Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our first Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Catalyst IBIC webinar on for the new academic year. I'm very excited that we got two great external speakers today. As you know, we run monthly webinars. The a regular time period is at the third Thursday of every month. And we have a series lined up between now and Christmas. But if anybody's got anything that they would like to share or like to present in terms of that would be of interest to the Northwest biotechnology community, please feel free to reach out, send Sabina or I a message, and/or email the IBIC team at ibic@manchester.ac.uk. So super excited that we have Paul Riley from Nexcea and Farid Khan from Chief EI here today. And they're going to be talking to us about from idea to market, strategic planning for innovation and really aligned with of our industrial biotech catalyst activity. So really pleased, and I'm going to hand over to you both to talk us through today. Thanks.
Super, thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Sabina, for the opportunity to talk to everyone. So I'm Paul Riley. I'm a consultant with Nexcea, and I'm joined by Farid Khan. Farid can tell you a bit more about his experience as we get into the presentation, but Farid has got lots of experience starting companies and lots of lessons about strategy and strategic planning, which are really super relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. And I'll just share my screen. So Eileen's already mentioned the title to you. And as well as talking about developing strategy, we're also going to be talking about how to take that strategy and turn it into a plan, because the two are very distinct, and but they're very much interlinked. So it's not just about thinking about a strategy, it's how we then operationalise that strategy to try and make it a reality. Just very quickly about Nexcea, we have a number of capabilities. The 5 key ones, well, strategy and strategy development are one of our primary services that we provide to clients, but we also do a number of other things: stakeholder engagement, market research, help companies with launch and commercialisation, and work on medcoms as well. And we've got a diverse range of clients spanning pharma, medical devices, healthcare organisations, the public sector, life science startups, and innovation hubs. So I'll get right into the presentation. The objectives, the two objectives, is to provide actionable insights. So actionable is a really important word there, things you can act on about how to develop a 3 to 5 year strategic plan that's going to drive innovation and growth in your business. And the lessons here for people who are just at the concept stage, who have got an idea and you think about how to try and make that land in the ecosystem. But also if you're a company with products on the market, there are lessons here as well. And what we're trying to do as well is help ensure that you have clear and structured annual objectives to keep you on track. We're going to talk about what is strategy. Strategy, that word gets used an awful lot outside of business as well as within business. We're going to talk about why we should bother making one, because it is quite an endeavour to make strategy. How do we do it? There are traps to avoid that I see people falling into again and again. So what are those traps and how can we avoid them? And importantly, how can we turn that strategy that we've so carefully developed into an actual plan? So let's start with what strategy. Well, strategy, it gets talked about in the world of sport, war, chess. Chess is often used to try and give an image of strategy. And for good reason. We hear about military strategies and sports strategies as well. In business, strategy, and there are lots of definitions, but this is one that I like. And strategy is the direction that an organisation takes with the aim of achieving future business success, setting out how it intends to employ its resources to realise its mission and vision. And I've highlighted some key words there. So it's about a direction. You're not at the planning stage with strategy, you're just trying to figure out where to place your bets based on the research that you do. And importantly, you have to be mindful of the resources that you've got to be able to do that. It's no point creating a strategy that would need money that you don't have or people with capabilities that you don't have. You need to think about what you have or what you might conceivably get in the near future, and how you can exploit what you have to deliver a strategy. I'm also going to mention something I don't see enough of, and that's the strategy statement. So it's great that companies have strategies. If you do have a strategy, terrific. But how do you use that? Whilst it can guide the company, it can also give other people within and outside the company a good sense of what you're all about. And so there are three things that a strategy statement should include, and that's objective, scope, and advantage. If you don't have a statement, then I would encourage you to think about having one. And I'm going to give you an example now. We're going to go out of the world of life sciences and industrial biotech. We're actually going to go into finance. And the reason is there was a great article published over 10 years ago in the Harvard Business Review. It looked at a bank, Edward Jones, financial services provider. It's still going strong. And they had a strategy statement which was to grow to 17,000 financial advisors by 2012, offering trusted and convenient face-to-face financial advice for conservative individual investors who delegate their financial decisions through a national network of one financial advisor offices. Now, there's a lot in there, and to help you, I'm providing what the authors did, and they broke it down to objective, scope, and advantage. And so have a think about your organisation. Do you have this? Something that you can communicate in grant applications or to prospective customers, or even to your internal teams. If you don't, then I would think about trying to create something. You can keep strategy front of mind if you do. But what do we use them for? Well, they are used for a number of different purposes. It can be to summarise your strategy, and that it can be kept prominent in people's minds. You can put it up around the workplace. You can talk about it when you're all together at meetings, but it can also be used externally as well. Grant applications, pitch decks, press releases, media articles. It's helpful to have something ready to drop into all of those things. I can't see your hands at the moment, but I'm guessing just from doing this presentation a number of times previously that not many people do have a strategy statement that's fewer than 35 words. So yeah, I'd encourage you to think about doing that. I'm going to introduce Farid now because, as I said, Farid's got a wealth of experience about trying to create strategies and put them into operation as well. So I've said that strategy is about defining objective, scope, and advantage. But do you always need to do that if you really know your product? You've got a really clear idea about the market that it seems suited for, then why would you bother spending time going through all of this work to try and decide an objective, scope, advantage? And I'm going to turn to Farid now and ask you to talk about your experience with one company. So yeah, tell us about this company.
Thank you, Paul. So although I'm under Chief AI today, I'm a co-founder of a number of companies based in the Northwest. In 2013, we incorporated a company. It was called Elucid M Health at the time. It was then subsequently called Pill Connect. And what the company was all about was trying to measure adherence. So if someone has a disease and they are taking their pills, if they don't take their pills on time, they will never ever get the right treatment and get better or get cured from that disease. And what we found actually, that even cancer patients, don't take their pills on time and the required dose. And this could be up to like 50% of people. And our first sort of idea really in the company was, well, how can we mass produce a bottle basically, maybe a pharmacy sort of standardized bottle that can then go into the NHS and can be prescribed for diseases like diabetes, for example. And so the strategy was really, perhaps our market was focused on the NHS as such. Even though I came from a pharmaceutical background, I really was thinking that, if we get these amount of sales within the NHS, it would be a given, if you like, that we would get huge amounts of revenues. But actually, what happened subsequently after a couple of months, we realized that actually it was a huge barriers to get into the NHS, and also it was so fragmented, and also the application of the technology was very diverse. You know, diabetes to pills which are for cardiovascular diseases, mental health, and all of these kind of things. So we really couldn't get into that. And so what we did know that clinical trials, for example, there was a lot of non-adherence in clinical trials. And that was pretty big. And pharmaceutical companies were interested because if a person was non-adherent in a trial, that would skew their results. In other words, you know, you couldn't really pass the clinical trial. And it ranged from 20 to 30 to 40% of non-adherence. People weren't taking the pills as they thought they were in clinical trials. So then we focused more on clinical trials. We did a small trial. This is all public knowledge, and it was successful. You can see people with their pills, how many pills they took. It was an app on the phone as well that communicated to the pill Connect solution, and it was a success. And indeed, you know, now we're going through a number of trials with the pharma companies. So, you know, again, you know, maybe if we diversified a little bit and thought, hey, maybe we should focus on both of them in parallel, as opposed to one specific revenue model that we're thinking in the NHS. But anyway, that was a kind of lesson that we kind of learned. But then, you know, we did divert to the right ends, and however, we should have gone from the outset to pharma because, you know, one clinical trial, you know, costs about $30 million. So there was a lot of money there to be had, and it was in the interest of pharma as well.
Mm. Was it a case then, Farid, do you think that it seems that the solution was there apparent to you, and that's why you chased the NHS? Whereas if you'd done perhaps a little bit more objective setting, thought about the scope, investigated those things a little bit more, systematically you'd have landed on the other choice first.
Yeah, I think we did know about pharma and these the fact that the clinical trials were up, but it was about entrance in that. I think more so that we had to trial the product.
Yeah,
I think that was a critical thing, and then once we got the trials done, then it was a perfect fit. So it was a product kind of fit, if you like.
Understood.
So that came into play.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was quite exciting that, you know, we are now entering trials and the technology works.
Yeah. Okay, great. No, thank you for that. Good. I don't know if there's some feedback. If just everyone checks that they are muted, just hear some feedback in our meeting room. I'll carry on. So yeah, as Farid says, you sometimes kind of end up going in maybe not the ideal direction unless you really explore those options. And articulating and validating your strategy, validating it before you start to put resources there matters. Okay, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about why we should bother making a strategy. I am certain that strategy increases your chance of success. I'm certain because there's evidence that it does as well, lots of evidence. And I just wanted to give you a sense of why it's worth going to the trouble to try and make a decent strategy. And these are several things from a great text by Grant, looking at lots of businesses and trying to understand how strategy can be turned into value for companies. And it's true, it gives you direction and focus. It means that you know where to allocate your resources. In terms of your team, you're not pulling in different directions. Everyone knows what decisions to make, whether to chase A or B. You've got a really clear sense of your competitive advantage. You can't have a business unless you can compete and have some kind of advantage over the competitors. And so a strategy is a systematic, determined way of really understanding where that is for you based on your strategic assets, your resources, your capabilities. Where can you win? It allows you to understand risks as well and manage them, anticipate them, be prepared to respond if things in the external environment change, for example. And it can also get you to market sooner. With Pill Connect, for instance, maybe if Farid and colleagues had focused entirely on the pharma opportunity to begin with in clinical trials, then they would have had something in the market sooner. And Farid mentioned, I couldn't help but notice, he was talking about revenues as part of what he was talking about. Revenues are important for the commercial business, and you do want to bring them forward. You want to start getting those revenue as soon as possible to make your investors happy, bring your product to customers, other reasons. And it just prepares you as well for change. It makes you more adaptable for change. So strategy definitely increases your chance of success. And there are other benefits as well that people might not appreciate. If you're responsible for leading a team, you can feel more in control. You're not constantly having to decide which opportunity to go after. You feel in control. The team has got purpose, and funders find you more credible. If you've done your homework, you can mention that you've spoken to people who are senior in really important stakeholder companies. You've heard from regulators or other people that are going to influence your success, and you've taken note of what they've told you. People who are thinking about backing you are going to find you more credible. So strategy definitely improves your chances of success. Let's turn to how it's made now. There are all manner of different ways of making strategy, and I think that will come across certainly by the end of this presentation. I've kind of chosen one. It's the method that we use here at Nexcea. It's a variation on the way of making strategy that's used by lots of large businesses. My background's life sciences, and it certainly gets used there. And sometimes it is a matter of getting the team together for an afternoon or a day or longer, sometimes a week, to really thrash out what domain you're going to be operating in, how you are going to compete. What is it you're going to say about your product or service that's going to resonate with your prospective customers? How are you going to set yourselves up internally for success? Decisions like strategic alliances, joint ventures, buying versus building, all of those sorts of things get discussed and thrashed out when people meet as a group to talk about strategy. And it's fascinating to see how often and how far apart people are, even when they belong to the same company and when they start to talk about strategy. But I think there's also personal reflections that can shape strategy as well. And outside formal settings, informal walks to meetings, down corridors, strategy also gets made there. So strategy is always happening. It's not an event that you do and create an output and put it on the shelf. Strategy is continuous. And where's it fit in? So I've talked a lot about making it operational. It's really important. There's no point having a strategy if you don't put it to practice. So I've tried to sketch out the sequence of things that make up from thinking about your mission and vision right down to changing your strategy based on feedback. But as you can see, mission and vision, companies often put those front and foremost. It sets out what the company's about and where they're headed, what they want to change. You'd normally also need to do an environmental analysis. So you're looking outside the business using models like PEST or PESTLE, but you're also looking within your business as well, using SWOT, which a number of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with. We'll talk about it in a moment. From that analysis, you can create a strategy, which you turn into a plan. You implement it, you have to monitor that implementation, and you adapt it. And that's where it's continuous. You're always thinking about adapting and adapting and adapting to make sure that you're geared up to get the greatest success that you can. Just a few explanations of those terms. I'm not going to read them out. I'll let you quickly look through them. But just to try and explain what those terms mean in practice. So quickly, definitions of mission and vision. So a mission is about what the organisation does and how it's going to achieve its vision. And the vision is the future that the organisation aspires to. So what does it want to be? It's often as well, what does it want to change? What difference is it going to make in the world? I've got a couple of examples actually. The University of Manchester, the mission is to advance education, knowledge and wisdom for the good of society. It's very laudable. Vision is to be recognised globally for the excellence of our people, research, learning and innovation, and for the benefits we bring to society and the environment. You'll find that there's all sorts of different ways of approaching what seems to be the two simple things, mission, vision. It gets interpreted in lots of different ways. Another local success story, Holly Firm, mission to facilitate the manufacture of holistically sustainable bioproducts at a value point at which they're affordable to everyone, eliminating the need for petrochemicals. and the vision is to create a world where better value and sustainable biochemicals eliminate the need for petrochemicals. So again, it's really clear where they operate, what they're trying to do, and how they're trying to do it. So do you have a mission and vision? If not, then it's worthwhile sitting down with a blank piece of paper and your colleagues and think about coming up with one. Sometimes it's not the end result that is the most valuable thing that comes out of that. It's the discussion. It's that shared understanding that you build through talking as a group. Okay, environmental analysis. Analysis is crucial for a strategy. You might be in an industry, you might have been in it for 30 years and know an awful lot about it. But if you're innovating and trying to do something different, going into a new area, you need to kind of check your facts and check your assumptions before you start to think about putting people, money, time against that. We need to look outside the company, within the company. If we're looking outside, it's what's in the business environment, the current, but also the future business environment that might affect the organisation, its level of success. And within the company, we're thinking about strengths and weaknesses, and the aspects within the organisation that might limit or enhance its achievements. There are things you're going to be able to leverage and the things that you're going to have to mitigate against. You need to surface those, discuss them with colleagues, ideally spoken to people outside the business as well to get those external perspectives. You can do desk research to try and understand a new area, but there's no substitute for speaking to people that already live in that world and operate in that world or have some kind of stake there to try and find out what they're thinking. That's where a lot of the value is to be found when you're doing this kind of work. So pest or pestle in this case, we create something like this. We're looking for things that are outside the control of the organisation, but only things that are going to be relevant to the level of success of the organisation. You need to be really specific about the exact nature of the factors that are going to affect your business. Often when people do this, they kind of pay lip service to it. They talk about the ageing population, climate change. But if it's not going to be directly relevant to your business and you can't articulate how it's going to affect the chance of success, then it doesn't belong in a pest. Thinking internally now, the SWOT. So SWOT's about within the organisation. Now, these should be within the control of the organisation. It's easy for, when you've got a group of people, for them to put a list of pet hates or fears and all sorts of things, but we need to be rational about this, and we need to make sure that whatever goes into the SWOT, it's really based on fact, hard evidence. Otherwise, you end up looking at something that's not a true reflection of what you're dealing with. So just to remind you, strategy is the direction an organisation takes with the aim of achieving future business success, setting out how it intends to employ its resources to realise its mission and vision. So we're talking about direction, resources, mission and vision. The analysis of the internal and external environment, what you're looking for is to be able to identify key barriers and levers that you need to address so that you can best fulfil your mission and vision. And the way that we do this, and it's used by lots of other companies, is to frame those strategic issues that we identify as issues to address. And we start them always with, how do we X, Y, and Z? I'll show you an example of that. We come up with these strategic issues by looking at our external and internal environmental analyses, and we turn it into a strategic issue. So, for example, how do we win offtake agreements and qualify our products with industrial customers who demand proven performance? So it's quite a lot to say that, but it's very common to companies that are trying to develop products and services in this space. You've got promising technology, you're sure that big manufacturers are going to want to take it, you're smaller, you've not got a great deal of evidence. How can you actually get them to take you seriously and to actually sign an agreement with you that will take tiny amounts of products until you can scale up what you can offer them? So it's a really strategic issue. It's a very difficult thing to crack, but it's also crucial for your success. So it's strategic and it sits before you plan, but you've got to figure out how to do that. So I keep talking about plan. Before we go on and talk about how to turn a strategy into a plan, I'm just going to turn to Farid again and say that I've talked about analysis. You can do the desk research. Anyone can Google at midnight and find out about potential areas to go into. And you do want to try and give yourself the best chance of success, don't you? Want to sort of set out your stall, so you're best set to capture opportunities. But yeah, in practice, does it work like that? Can you predict from Googling and what you know, your hunches, what the right answers are? I'll let you talk to this example, Farid.
Thank you. So back to Paul's points, setting out your stall. So in 2018, we formed a company called Chief AI. And the reason why it was called Chief is that it sits at the top. And the idea was to have a kind of supermarket for AI in healthcare. So that's biotech and healthcare. But in 2018, there wasn't many AI companies who were producing a lot of AI tools, if you like. For example, image-based diagnostics. So, if someone has an MRI scan, can they detect cancer or histopathological samples? Can they scan them and look at, signs of tumors or thereof? So there's the imaging-based work. And so there wasn't a lot of these kind of things. So, but what we thought at that time was that, there were a number of emerging companies. And we wanted to create a supermarket, a kind of an exchange where Chief AI would sit in the middle, collect all the companies that want to have their services and have all the customers, and we link those up. So that was the strategy. The idea was, this concept of having a marketplace, if you like. And we had, in that marketplace, you would have to put your own brands in there as well. So we developed a cancer-based imaging solution, MRI based, and also a kind of drug discovery one as well, utilizing past publications and looking at targets. And it was quite interesting. And they were standalone, and we put those in there because you had to populate the shelves, if you like. So that was an interesting exercise. We reached out to many AI companies, but because they were new and they thought they were going to get huge market share anyway, they didn't want to be part of a supermarket. Maybe later on when they're successful and they're saturated, maybe but actually we found that they want to do those themselves, and we were quite early as well. 2018 sort of was very early for. So we developed this amazing infrastructure that allows us to connect between all the various AI and the customer. But we weren't having great success on that. So that was, again, a kind of redirect. And then we started selling our own custom-made solutions to hospitals and taking that forward. So that's the kind of fallback idea. And so Chief AI is now working with customers directly. But that doesn't mean that this concept will not be useful maybe in the next 6 months, because we're getting more and more inquiries who want to be on this, because we're perhaps just way too early. Now you have more AI companies, and AI has changed in a lot of ways from 2018 because data sets create algorithms, and then that data set is continually changing. So you have version 1, 2, and 3. So all of these, and a lot of now, companies can do AI because they've got the expertise to do this much faster than it was, 5, 6 years ago. So it's the right timing as well. So you just can't predict certain things, but certainly we were too early.
Yeah. No, thanks, Farid. Good. So thinking about that, the product market fit, is there a market for your product? And is it mature enough? And well, is it even there? I guess it wasn't. Ahead of the curve, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So clearly Farid and team had hunches, and they were confident that this was going to be a market, but maybe with more definitive data, you might have had a sense that it might have come a bit later.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Let's talk now about how to turn strategy into a plan. So, we've looked at the external and internal environment. We've thought about all the particular levers that we can pull, all of the obstacles we're going to have to find a way to get over, get around. We've, on a big flip chart, we've circled the really big issues that we think are going to be key to our success, either to leverage opportunities or to try and mitigate threats. And now we're going to have to think, well, how do we do that? They're important. How do we address them? Now, the business strategy in larger corporations, they have different time horizons. So they do need to think far into the future, as do we all, really. But they also need to think closer as well, in the nearer future, and plan accordingly. So business strategy has a 3 to 5 year horizon. And within that, you think about how to innovate and grow. Now, a strategic plan, another term, has an 18 to 36 month horizon, so 1.5 to 3 years. And typically in a larger company, you might have the marketing part of the company, manufacturing, each with their own strategic plans, trying to drive them forward for greater success, to help deliver the business strategy. So they're all working together, the different functions contributing to deliver the longer term business strategy. But in the nearer term, so you know what you need to do tomorrow to put things in place to achieve that success, you need an operational plan. And they've got a shorter horizon. You may be thinking, you know, what you'll be doing in like 6 to 12 months. And each team undertakes those, which to feed into the strategic plans, which feed into the business strategy. So this is just a schematic trying to show how they fit together. So activities undertaken by each team at the bottom, which feed into functional strategies, and then overall into the business strategy. The way that we take those issues and turn them into actions that somebody's going to be responsible for is to use this approach. So we start with a strategic issue. So how do we address key barriers and levers? We have to think about all the options. That's where the flip charting comes in. And doing this kind of activity, strategic planning in person, is it's far easier and far more productive, I'd say, than trying to do it online. You can do it online, but it's really tiring and it takes a long time. Everyone being in the same room works better. You've got to come up with all your different options to address the issues that you've identified. You then need to think about objectives. Well, what is it that we're trying to change? How can we measure? What do we use to measure whether we've made the change we want to? We also introduce another concept, imperatives. There'll be certain things that you just absolutely have to address to be able to address the strategic issue. So we also try to capture the strategic imperatives, things that you have to either have to be true or that you have to make true for your strategy to work. And at the end come the actions, which will be a long list of things that individuals take and deliver. Going back to my example of my strategic issue earlier, so how do we win offtake agreements, qualify our products with industrial customers who demand proven performance? Well, let's look at what that might look like going through this kind of process. So I've not listed all of the options. It's just an example. I've come up with one that might be plausible. So, for example, the option might be to secure long-term supply contracts with early adopters. So there are conservative prospective customers out there that wouldn't want to touch your products until you've already got customers and proven that what you're doing is safe and reliable and all the rest of it. But you have got early adopters who might be interested and they'll occupy a particular niche of your prospective customer base. So you're looking at finding them, trying to convince them to enter into an agreement with you. And what do we want from that? Well, we want by the end of next year to sign 3 multi-year offtake agreements covering at least 50% of plant capacity. So that's pretty specific. Objectives should be smart, specific, measurable, actionable, time-bound, realistic. What are the imperatives? Well, you absolutely need to be ready to deliver that. So you need to align your technical scale, regulatory approvals with customer qualification timelines. If you don't do that, then forget it. The actions, one of them, so for example, develop and negotiate commercial terms with lead customers. Somebody needs to be given that job to do and they need to get out there and do it. And you'd have a number of other options, objectives, imperatives and actions, and it would build into a plan that amongst you and the team, you can go out and bit by bit, day by day, get closer to making your strategic aims a reality. And you do that over a different time frame. So a closer timeline. it might be running pilot trials with our customers, delivering samples, and you can read the rest. I'm sure you get a sense of how these might change if they're more immediate. So we've talked about framing our strategic issues, the how do we's, and then we can use them to guide our work, I guess. And we don't need to keep worrying about continuous strategy. We've got a clear plan, and we're going to get on and do it. But those clear plans, I guess, don't always turn out the way we expect, which is why we need to be nimble. Farid, got another example.
Okay, so this is a company I'm co-founder of called Bright Biotech. So Bright Biotech, what it does, it produces growth factors in plants. So these are an array of growth factors, both human and animal growth factors. But coming back to what Paul was talking about, one of the important aspects of running a business is to have these contract agreements, if you like. These are future agreements which are important for companies. So it shows their viability and that there is a market for them. So what this company does is produce these growth factors, which are from plant origin and not from animal origin. So that's quite an advantage in some ways, but also we can produce quite a lot of amounts in plants as opposed to the animal bioreactors, cell lines that currently produce all of these growth factors. I mean, originally, the company idea was really to produce these various growth factors and then utilize them as therapeutics to grow, stem cells, and then use those as therapeutics in a variety of applications. But it's just to produce the growth factors themselves. But as it came about, what happened was when we raised money a couple of years ago, that we also realized that there was massive interest in those days in having lab grown meat. And one of the barriers was, to lab grown meat in terms of its cost and economics was the cost of current growth factors, which made it inhibitive to do that. But our technology, growing them in plants, for example, just negated that. And so, we had a lot of investors coming from the food industry. So it was quite a bit of a clash for us. And so we took that money, and of course, our aim was to sell these to companies that are growing meat, and then they can go. But there was huge sort of regulatory barriers, mostly in countries that stopped you doing this, except for Singapore. So we could always supply that. But actually, our market was, it was difficult to get to that kind of market. And we're kind of thinking now, well, we are a company that produces these. Well, why don't we actually produce it for other uses, as therapeutics? Can we get in, certified as, CGMP manufacturer? Can they be utilized by other companies? So we kind of taking this kind of pivotal role. Not that we've stopped the other route for sort of animal cell culture for meat purposes, but this other route may be a fast way to do offtake agreements you were talking about. So those offtake agreements, could be with companies that are developing stem cells, and then if they have the same performance or even better without animal sort of components, which is now preferable, then why don't we do that? So there is all of this kind of within this company. It's almost like a platform technology. So we could do perhaps second part why I was talking about the market applications in stem cell technology and therapeutics. So this is something that we're quite excited about. But we knew that pivot might happen. And who knows, you know, if lab-grown meat regulations occur within Europe and the UK, it might change in the future. But this is something on strategy, you know, was more regulatory controlled than anything else.
Yeah, that's great. Good. So that's a good example of a company deciding to pivot based on the evidence in front of them. So strategy is ongoing. And you might not think of that. You might just think of things changing that need a reaction. If you've done a good job of thinking about all your options, you know, your strategic assets, those resources and capabilities, then you're well placed to decide what the best opportunities are to go after and make the best choices. So I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to go through the last remaining slides. Let's think about other traps that we need to avoid. So there's a terrific paper by an American professor who was always asked to talk about how to make a good strategy. He got fed up giving that presentation, and he thought he would talk about what he sees in really bad strategies, things time and time again. And he came up with some traps to avoid. So bad strategies, so be wary of this. If you can't decide, I have seen this myself, where a strategy contains everything. It's kind of a list of what the company is already doing, and that's the strategy. But it mustn't be that. You're trying to work out how to win, and that requires choices. Your resources are finite. It's okay to think about what could be different if you do get that money and plan accordingly. But yeah, you need to choose about where you're going to deploy your resources, capabilities to win. Also, template style strategy. You might think that I'm kind of guilty about today. I've presented a template. I must emphasise that whilst I've got templates, I put the information into the templates after we've been through a process, which is there's a system to it, but it tries to be really creative. So we're trying to explore all sorts of different ideas, but at some point it needs to be organised and parcelled and put into something with structure. So that's why mine look like a template. But starting just by filling in a box that says put your mission here, put your vision here, that is not the way to do it. You need to do lots of discussing, research, speak to people before you start to do that kind of thing. And the hallmarks have to spot a bad strategy. Well, if it's not really facing the problem, there might be some really glaring issues that the company needs to either exploit or address. And if it's not really doing that, then that's a hallmark of a bad strategy. Also, putting goals in there that are just goals with no means of achieving them. Get a bad strategy, bad strategic objectives. Your objectives are meant to get you closer to delivering the strategy, and sometimes they can be off the mark and not do that. So your objective has to be something that really is going to operationalise that strategy and get you closer to achieving it. And last thing is fluff. We've all seen this when companies put things on their websites about being the best in the world at X, Y, and Z. And so there's no place for fluff in a good strategy. Also, companies can be guilty of wishful thinking. Strategy can sound amazing, but if you've not got the resources and capabilities to deliver it, it is just wishful thinking. So think carefully about what you've got to work with and where you're intending to go. A few closing thoughts. I've said strategy is continuous. You do need to, from time to time, I'd say spend some time to develop a strategy, revisit strategy, but you need to carve out time and do it. Spend time with the team and revisit strategy. But it doesn't mean that you don't do anything at all with strategy for another 6-12 months. It's always happening. So whilst you've got a planned strategy that might be written down, it's what you've discussed at that twice yearly meeting, you also have an emergent strategy, and that's where things happen and you have to adapt your strategy accordingly. Real strategy, it does tend to be made informally. Strategic planning, it's been called an oxymoron. Yeah, the planning meetings are useful, but really it's when things crop up is when strategy is really made, and rarely in conference rooms where formal planning meetings are held. For me, the real value of strategic planning is in those discussions that are had, the strategic discussions. Because sometimes people think of the output of a strategic planning meeting being that PowerPoint slide deck or a document. Whilst it's good to have that, The real value is the discussion that comes during that day. People realising that they are at totally different ends of an opinion over something. People that hold very different ideas about what the company is actually even for. There's all manner of things that you need to address so you can get aligned and all work towards something with a shared purpose. So for me, the key value is creating prepared minds, that somebody in 3 weeks, when faced with option A or option B, a decision, they know it's clearly option A based on the strategy. And so, yeah, I think that you need to be strategic thinkers. So even if you're a startup and you prefer to kind of wing it, there's no point having a strategy. We need to make the product work first. Yeah, I've heard that lots of times. Some analysis and planning is worthwhile. And actually, even people say that we don't have a strategy. Successful startups have said we never had a strategy. When you dig into it, they did have a strategy. It might not have been articulated, written down anywhere, but they did loads of research. They listened to everything and adapted accordingly. And if you ever want to reach out, then you're welcome to do that. Just before we close, Farid has got something that'll be of interest as well. So
yeah, I mean, strategy is important. Life sciences is a very high risk, area in which if you spin out companies, make companies, there's depending on the stage, of course, early stage companies are very, very risky. I'd just like to announce that, I'm working with a group called the Salonica Group. Salonica Group have launched an infinity fund of 25 million, looking at early stage companies. So that's from ideation to early spin outs. So welcome on LinkedIn, any inquiries, new companies. So that's just an announcement. Thank you.
Thanks, Aileen. Sabrina?
Brilliant. Oh, I'm losing my voice. You've blown me away that much. Brilliant. Thanks very much for that insightful webinar. I'm happy to open it out to questions. Feel free to pop your hand up or shout out. Oh yeah, we've got one on the chat. So we'll start with Yolanta. So I often see early stage companies overgeneralize their strategies. In practice, this means they try to pursue too many directions at once or set objectives that are not realistic given their stage of development. What practical advice would you give to founders to avoid this? Oh, good question.
Yeah, I think that's very typical, and it happens in corporations as well as startups. I think in itself, it's a strategic conundrum because you do want to do so many things, but you've got such limited resources, so it's tricky. But as I said, it does come down to choice. But that doesn't mean just thinking we're only going to spend the money on getting IP because we've heard that's important, and we're not going to speak to customers. I think a startup's like spinning lots of plates. That you've got a lot of things that you have to do. So you do have to. There's a choice to be made about being broad. If you're really broad with your resources, with your time, you can only be shallow as well, and that might be right for some startups to try and do a lot, but know that you're not going to get very far. Others, though, will choose to be really narrow in their focus, and that allow them to get greater depth and perhaps move faster and get further. But they perhaps blinkered then and closing out other opportunities. Farid, is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, so life sciences in its own, in a kind of nature of itself, may be a platform technology. So, I was looking at a company which miniaturized the size of a mobile phone, a real-time PCR machine. So that means, you can detect viruses, bacteria. What do you focus on? And it's real time in the sense it's almost within 5 minutes it can tell you what the various bugs are. So it's a platform. So you have to then focus on what you're going to utilize that, which market you have to utilize, and that's a problem, you see. So and they've decided to go on UTI, and that's fine. They can do clinical trial. So often it's what do you focus on? Is it the device and opportunity? And a lot of, if you're talking about, single chain antibody generation, there's just different types of technology. Again, you've got a plethora of therapeutics from Alzheimer's to everything else. So I think you have to focus on something because, investors don't like platforms in some ways. simply because it's just too wide. But I think if you put, focus on one with perhaps the best opportunity, and then in the background put in brackets, it could be used for other things. I think that's the way forward.
We have time for one or two other questions. I have one, if no one else has. Don't see any other hands. I wanted to ask, so we're doing a big strategy relaunch within the university, but also, as we look to build up a new spin-out activity from our own research. And strategy, I completely agree, super important. Got to have that North Star and get people aligned to it and make it measurable, etc. But strategy eats culture for breakfast, or culture eats strategy for breakfast. I get it the right way around. What are your hints and tips on embedding the strategy and encouraging people to lean into it?
So you're right, it's a really well-known phrase and there's a lot of truth in it, certainly. I think if strategy is made by the executive team and they then try and sort of force it down in a waterfall type way to people on the shop floor, we'll say, then it's going to have a hard time to be adopted. The strategy, going through that process of creating a strategy, as I said, it's a lot of discussion, it's exploring opportunities and narrowing it down to think about where you've got the best chance of being successful. Without being exposed to that, reading something that's been distilled down so much there's lost all of the things that you've ruled out, it doesn't become very meaningful. So for me, to make strategy live, you do need to involve everyone in it. I mean, there's a story in it, I'll get this wrong, but it's a story that gets retold about putting a man on the moon and having a tour around the factory and speaking to the cleaner, and the cleaner could talk about what the mission was, is to put a man on the moon. Everyone in the company could gather around this simple idea of strategy. And when I said before about the strategy statement, keeping that alive, including it in places, communications, putting it on the wall, that can help, but only if people have got there themselves, if they've been helped, facilitated to understand, yeah, I understand why we're doing this, and I understand why we're not doing that. That's the buy-in that companies need to get. If you make it and then just deliver it as a, 50-minute presentation, then that's going to be tricky. Farid, any thoughts on culture strategy?
Yeah, I mean, startup strategy is quite different to almost a corporate strategy at the university.
Yeah.
So they're two completely different, creatures. In terms of strategy for a startup, you may have just one person in the startup to start with, a CEO, maybe a small team around that, and you have restricted funds, and you have what we call the red line, which is the day that the company dies. And so these are kind of the pressures that you're under in a startup. So you need to really have a strategy. It's much more important in that early phase. As far as the corporate strategy, almost corporate academic strategy, the thing is, the way I would look at it, I mean, I've been working with the university. Well, I was working at the university for many, many years, 15 years plus. But so it's to have a look at what happened before, have a look at what worked and what didn't work, because you've got a lot of that information already, what culture did work and what didn't work. And I think I think that evolution needs to happen. I think also the fact that there is now a better options in terms of spinning out companies. If there's definitive IP, then there's a strategy of having equity-based strategies, and if there isn't, there's a licensing. But there's also those without, which can spin out without that, but it's just still associated to universities. All those three strategies, if you like, work. And I think it's important to have all three, so something still associated with the university, whether it's their founders and support and perhaps maybe incubating them. That is something that comes back to the university, and it may not have to be equity based. But I like the fact that also the university is now looking into putting small amounts of money or equivalent funds into companies as well, startups. So that's a good thing to start up, which didn't happen before. So this is a new kind of culture, being part of your mission statement that Paul read out for the university. So that's my bit of knowledge to pass on.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Very insightful. And yeah, watch this space in terms of new mission and vision and strategy from the university middle of next month. And also in terms of what Manchester University certainly is looking to do to help and support budding entrepreneurs spin out, start up, and help accelerate that forward through Unit M. I'm just going to read out, because I think this summarises it perfectly, the comment from Richard: focus, 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 and do fewer things excellently. I think we all need to engrave that in our brain. And very last question from Rory. He says, thank you, been fascinating, but he missed the name of the fund that you mentioned, Farid. Do you want to just reiterate that? And then we'll,
it's called
we'll
the Salonika Infinity Fund.
Brilliant. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, especially Paul and Farid. Excellent presentation, and it's going to be a super resource for everybody to be able to watch online on our YouTube channel. And the next webinar is going to be on the 28th of October. When we're going to have Mohammed El Haj from Bright Biotech. So you've teed him up nicely there, Farid. And he's going to be talking about his innovation journey as he builds out a startup and entering market phase, and all the learnings that he's had in that journey. So please tune in 28th of October and feel free to reach out to the wider community with any other questions, comments, and also us in the IBIC team for any suggestions of webinars, but also suggestions of activities and things. We've still got a lot of money to get out the door in the next 3 years, so please help us do that in terms of activities and projects. But look forward to seeing everyone soon. Thanks everyone for your time. Lovely to see everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.